Hi, I'm Hannah Slydel. I'm co-president Democracy and Education in the Students' Union here at SOAS. I studied art history for 4 years at SOAS. So I guess the things I liked best at SOAS were, it's difficult to say, the content that you study in class is amazing, but I think the rest of the environment in SOAS in less academic, more informal settings is where I really got to practice a lot of the sort of political theory and stuff I'd learn in classes. So I know I really shouldn't say this, but I guess a lot of what I learned was actually through my engagement with the Students' Union and through campaigns like Justice for Cleaners. I did really enjoy the teaching, but I definitely didn't utilise it in the ways I could have. For instance, I think it took me about 3 years to start doing the assigned reading I was given in class, and I really regret that, because once I did start doing it, it made the whole academic and educational experience so much more interesting and something that was, yeah, you're not just sort of getting a surface level understanding of things, you're actually really developing like a critical and nuanced understanding of quite complex and really interesting things. A really good example of essay feedback I got was with one lecturer who was quite a junior lecturer. They just finished their PhD, and when they gave us our essays back, every single student would be invited to go and meet with them. Actually, to get your essay back, you had to go and meet with them, and they talk at great lengths with you about all the intricacies of your essays. And this was like regardless whether you got a really good grade or like a not so good grade, like they would just really like get their teeth into it with you, and you'd have that space where you had, you know, it'd been a few weeks since you'd written it, you had that sort of mental space from it, and you could start to sort of think about some of the issues that came up. So they'd talk about things like your writing style, the ways in which you developed arguments, the way you referenced, like the sources used, and I just found having that physical space to speak to a lecturer in a non-judgmental, empathic way about some of the issues that come up in essays was really good, and I did well in the essays with that lecturer, but every time after we had feedback I'd do better and better, and I think that's a really good practice and a brilliant example of essay feedback and why it's so important for students to respond to that and to really take seriously the feedback we're given on essays. And I think it's really important when you get feedback as well to kind of not necessarily look at that in reference to the grade all the time, to read the feedback, think about that, reread your essay, explore the issues that they've pointed at, and then look at the grade and think, okay, yeah, I can understand where that comes from, or oh, I don't really understand that, or yeah, I got a really great grade, but I still have to think about this. And I think sometimes when you get good marks as well, you kind of feel like you don't have to read the feedback, and that's still really ridiculous, because we're not just here to get good grades, we're here to develop our like academic skills. I would have really listened to people when they told me to do my reading. I know that sounds silly, and I know that for so many people academia and life aren't divorced from each other, and sometimes you're negotiating really painful and difficult things in your personal life, but telling lecturers about that and then trying to work with them and the Students' Union and Learning and Teaching Department to create a space where you can study is so important, because once you stop doing your like assigned readings for lectures, your ability to like critically engage with the content covered in classes is like massively limited. So I would do my reading, I would ask for support when I needed it, and I'd speak to personal tutors and lecturers and try and keep them updated with issues that were occurring in my life. And I would go to office hours. Office hours are so important. It provides a level of like pastoral, academic and welfare support that you don't get in lecture theatres when there's like 50 other students and you're speaking to people with expertise in the subjects you're studying, and you won't get that opportunity again in life. So like you should really seize it, I think. So in regards to study skills, I think the most important thing is to experiment and play, and especially if you're a first year student, like you're only required to get 40% to progress into your second year. And I think the sort of philosophy behind that is that the first year is a time for you to explore learning and teaching stuff, like what the best learning styles are for you, what the best teaching environments are for you, how you feel and how you're going to position yourself within academia. So I would spend the first year experimenting with different ways of revising it, different ways of reading, and I think that's really, really important, because I think there's no set way. It's going to change for everyone. For me, I found group study so important. I found creating a space where I could speak to people in my class about readings and what I didn't understand and what I did and how that related to something else I was studying, and trying to look at the intersections between my course and my degree and other people's ones brought a lot of what I was studying to life and really, really stimulated me in that respect. And equally, I found then being able to practice what I was studying. So I studied art history, and a lot of what I studied was about labour and like the performative aspects of identity. So I, like, being a part of certain campaigns at SOAS gave me the space to think about how that worked in my immediate life and in the lives of people around me, and bringing that to life was so important for me, I think. So I myself have actually never used LTD, the Learning and Teaching Department, which was formerly known as ADD. But in my capacity as a student unions officer, we're always referring people to LTD, and there's one service that students seem really, really engaged with and that we often refer postgraduate students to, which is the PhD tutorial scheme. So the way it works is that master students can be tutored 3 times a term by PhD students, and that can be like helping them with essays and reading, just negotiating that sort of level of academia. And I think the really, really great thing about that is that there isn't any sort of diagnostic coursework for master students in their first term. So there isn't really, unless they have lecturers that are giving them brilliant essay feedback and really, really trying to like work with them, there isn't that much space for master students to work through the issues they might be having. And I think this provides a brilliant way of doing that. And I love the idea of that sort of across school solidarity of students teaching each other and supporting each other in that way. So I think a lot of students don't really listen when they're spoken to about plagiarism, referencing, all of these sorts of things, because they kind of, in the grand scheme of things, seem quite minor, but actually they're really, really not. Like, they can be reasons for students failing their degrees. And also, like, good referencing is just good academic practice, and it's a skill you need to have if you're going to continue within academia and education more broadly. Again, LTD have a really fantastic study skills session, but they have a series of workshops, and as far as I'm aware, one of those is on referencing and plagiarism. Outside LTD, there's a series of leaflets that have information about this. I actually did look at those a few times and I found them really useful. And there's stuff on plagiarism, referencing. There's also things like how to get a first and study skills for success, and I think those are really, really useful. One I'd really look out for is self-plagiarism. I think people don't really understand what that is or why it's a thing, but the school is not going to give you marks for work you've previously done. So taking direct extracts from other essays and putting them into other ones, as tempting as it might be when you've got a deadline the next day, it's just not a good idea. I'd really advise against that. And also, like, I think it's important to understand things like essays and exams, which can be so stressful. I really understand that, but trying to reframe the way you're thinking about them as opportunities to educate yourself and to develop new skills, rather than like just jumping through hoops to get grades. So for students with specific learning difficulties at SOAS, so that could be dyspraxia, dyslexia, and a number of other things, there are fantastic services available at SOAS, and sometimes those aren't clearly signposted, and it would be great to formalise the system with personal tutors and course conveners and stuff, so that referral process could be easier. But there's a woman called Carol who works in the school, who's part of a team that's sort of a part of learning and teaching department or connected to them, who are there to specifically support people. They're learning advisors, they're there to support students that do have specific learning difficulties. I myself went for a dyspraxia screening at SOAS, and because I'm not very good at being organised, failed to then go and get the failed. So I myself went for a dyspraxia screening at SOAS. Because I'm not incredibly organised, I then failed to get the off-campus one, which was required for the disabled students allowance. But actually just going for that screening and being told that some of the issues I was facing weren't just me being silly, were like actually because I had dyspraxia, was so important, and just accessing that support and feeling like this wasn't all my fault, this was something I could work on and work with, and being given advice about specific like learning techniques. So there's a brilliant software, for instance, called Mind Map that every student has access to, and that helps you to plan essays and to sort of put your thoughts in different ways, and sort of I think this whole thing is really, really great because it challenges the idea that there's a normal student that thinks and learns and acts in a normal way. And I would really encourage everyone to access learning advisors, to access dyspraxia and dyslexia support, because yeah, we deserve to be in education too, and like our ways of approaching education aren't silly, they're no less valid. In fact, it's kind of amazing that we've got this far without support, so let's access it now and let's challenge this idea of like a normative education.